They said the snow that winter fell heavier than any in living memory, soft as wool, but thick enough to smother the breath right out of the hills. I was 40 then, maybe less, though the years have worn my bones thin enough that I hardly remember what 40 ever felt like. The town below Crow Hill was quiet in those days. Just a dozen shacks, a church with a cracked bell, and the long road that led nowhere good. But the twins, Lord help me, the Crow Hill twins, they were something else. 7 feet tall by the time they turned 17, shoulders wide as fence gates, eyes pale and still like pond ice. Their mother, Martha Crow, said they were touched by the Almighty, born in the thunder of the same storm that took her husband. Folks whispered other things, though. They said the lightning struck her house that night and didn't stop burning for 3 days. I can still see her cabin if I close my eyes, half buried in frost, its roof sagging under the weight of the world. I remember the smell of smoke and meat coming from her chimney, though no one in the valley had livestock left to butcher. I remember thinking it strange that she never came down to town anymore, not even for salt or flour. Still, when you live that far from others, you learn to let things lie. You mind your own. Some nights I'd hear laughter echoing from the ridge. It wasn't the kind of laughter you hear from men. It was deeper, too deep, like something the earth coughed up and couldn't swallow again. And always 2 voices, never 3, never 1. Just the twins, calling into the dark, as if waiting for someone to answer. The first traveler went missing just after Christmas. His name was Henry Clark. A peddler from Charleston, carried a cart full of mirrors and trinkets. They found his cart overturned by the bridge, but no Henry. Just footprints, 2 pairs side by side, leading uphill into the trees. The sheriff said wolves got him, but wolves don't walk upright. Wolves don't sing hymns while they feed. I remember that night like a fever. I lay awake listening to the wind push against my walls, and I could swear I heard a hymn. Low, broken and wrong. I whispered a prayer, but the words came out hollow, empty as the church pews come winter. It was the first time I felt the valley turn against me. You ever live somewhere that feels like it's breathing, like the ground itself has lungs, drawing in all the secrets you bury and exhaling them in your sleep? That's what Crow Hill was like. Every sigh of wind, every creak of branch, it carried memory. It carried sin, and I suppose that's why I'm speaking now. I don't have much time left, and there are things I can't carry into the ground with me. The twins, the way they looked, the way they smiled, the way they fed. It all comes back when I close my eyes. And Lord, forgive me. Part of me still loved them. I remember that January morning when I first saw them again, both standing by the tree line, barefoot in the snow, skin so pale it looked like it was shining. They weren't boys anymore. They weren't men either. Something between. One of them, I think it was Thomas, smiled at me and said, "Cold don't bother us no more, Mr. Eli." And the way he said it, I felt it deep in my gut, like the earth itself was listening. I should have walked away then. Should have told the preacher what I saw. But I didn't. I just nodded, tipped my hat, and kept walking. Because back then, I still believed some things were better left buried. I was wrong. The next one to vanish was a girl, young, maybe 16. Her name was Clara Dawes, daughter of the blacksmith. Sweet little thing, always humming when she brought her father lunch. I still remember her song, a hymn about forgiveness, though her voice made it sound more like surrender. She went missing one Sunday after service. Walked home through the birch trail like she always did. Never made it back. We searched 3 days. Dogs, lanterns, prayers. But all we found was her bonnet, laid gentle on a stump, as if someone had placed it there to be found. The sheriff said the storm must have taken her, that she'd lost her way in the snow. But we all knew that wasn't true. The tracks we found were wrong. There were 2 sets again, wide steps, bare feet, and between them, Drag marks. I didn't sleep much after that. Each night, the wind in the hollow carried something that sounded almost human. Sometimes laughter, sometimes crying. I tried not to listen, but when the cold creeps into your bones and the fire's dying low, the silence pulls tricks on you. It starts whispering names, and sometimes it whispers yours. The townsfolk started locking their doors before dusk. The preacher said we were being tested, that the Lord's hand was heavy but just. But even he stopped climbing the hill after dark. He said he saw lights up there, red and flickering, not from any hearth or lantern. Said he heard a hymn too, only slower, like the twins were dragging it through blood. You ever notice how faith begins to sound different when you're afraid? How even the softest prayer starts to tremble, like it knows it's not being heard. I used to pray for the twins, that whatever had them, whatever black hunger they'd found, would pass. But my prayers began to rot the moment they left my mouth. One night I saw them again, or thought I did, down by the river bend, where the willows hang low. The moon was thin, and the air was cold enough to make my breath shatter. I saw two shapes crouched by the water. One of them turned, and the moonlight hit its face. Its mouth! It wasn't shaped right. The skin was stretched too wide, as if it had forgotten how to smile like a man. And its eyes, God help me, they looked like Clara's. I stumbled backward, dropped my lantern. The flame hissed out in the snow, and the world went black. When I looked up again, they were gone. But the river was still moving, slow and dark. And I swear to you, I heard chewing beneath the current. After that night, I stopped going to church. The preacher noticed, came to my house, asked if I'd lost my faith. I told him I hadn't lost it. I'd just seen too much of it. He didn't understand. None of them did. But faith and fear are brothers, and once you've seen their faces, you can't tell them apart. The thaw came early that year. The snow melted fast, and what it left behind. We found bones near the creek. 7 travelers' worth, maybe more. Some old, some new, all gnawed clean. The sheriff said wild dogs again, but even he wouldn't say it twice. I went home that night, poured myself a glass of corn whiskey, and sat by the window till morning. I watched the hill. I waited for a light, a sound, anything. But Crow Hill just breathed, slow and steady, like it was sleeping, and I remember thinking, maybe the hill's dreaming of us the way we dream of the dead. That's when I realized the truth, that it wasn't just the twins who were hungry. The whole damn valley was. By spring the hill had gone quiet again. The air no longer carried screams or hymns, only the slow groan of trees, thawing after a long freeze. But quiet is not peace. You learn that when you've lived here long enough. Quiet means the hunger has settled, waiting for its next breath. I told myself I'd move away. Sell the house, leave the valley, never speak of it again. But leaving a place like this is like leaving your own reflection. It follows you, even in clean mirrors. Every night I'd wake before dawn to that same sound. 2 heavy footsteps, 1 pause, then 2 more. Slow, patient, familiar. It wasn't until I found the mark on my door that I knew I was being remembered. 2 small handprints, one beside the other. Too large for a child, too narrow for a man. Pressed in something that had dried to a dark, rusty brown. I tried washing them off, but the stains stayed, no matter how hard I scrubbed. By morning my knuckles were bleeding, and the handprints still looked fresh. The sheriff came by, said maybe it was kids playing tricks. But there were no kids left in Crow Hollow. Families had gone. The blacksmith's shop was shuttered. The church bell rusted still. Only a handful of us remained, those too poor to leave or too haunted to try. I saw them again a few nights later. The twins, or what was left of them. They stood where the hill met the fog, tall as fence posts, faces pale against the dark. Their eyes glowed faint, as though the fire inside them hadn't gone out completely. I should have turned away, but something about them, the stillness, the terrible grace of it, rooted me where I stood. One of them lifted his arm, slow and deliberate, and pointed down toward me. Not a threat, more like an invitation. The other tilted his head, mouth opening just enough for me to see what hung between his teeth. It wasn't flesh. It wasn't food. It was something smaller, maybe a ring, maybe a bit of cloth, something that belonged to someone I once knew. I fell to my knees right there in the mud. I tried to pray, but the words came out wrong. They sounded old, older than me, older than the church that built them. When I finished, I looked up, and the twins were gone again. That night I dreamt of their mother, Haven Crow. Her hair was white as ash, her face soft with that same tired kindness she'd worn all her life. She stood at the foot of my bed, holding something in her apron, something wrapped in burlap and tied with a rosary. "I tried to keep them," she whispered, "but the Lord don't take what he didn't make." When I woke, the window was open. The room smelled of soil and meat. I followed the scent outside, all the way up the ridge, until I reached what was left of the Crow farmhouse. The door was hanging by one hinge. The floorboards gave under my feet like brittle ribs. In the center of the room was that same burlap bundle from my dream. I knew I shouldn't open it, but I did. Inside were bones, not whole, just fragments, like someone had tried to rebuild something human and given up halfway. That was the moment I stopped believing this was sin. Sin belongs to men. What was happening here was older. There's a sickness in certain bloodlines, a hunger that doesn't end with death. Maybe the crows carried it. Maybe the hill itself birthed it. But when I touched that bundle, I swear I felt a pulse, just once. A single heartbeat, faint and patient. I buried it under the birch tree near the stream. But as I walked away, the ground beneath my boots felt soft. Too soft, like something was breathing under there. And that's when I knew. The twins weren't gone. They were only waiting to be called again. I never told anyone what I buried that night. The hill has a way of keeping its own secrets, and the earth, well, it knows how to seal a man's guilt tighter than a coffin lid. For years, I carried that silence like a sickness. The world went on. Seasons turned, roads rotted. The church collapsed into dust. But in my sleep I still saw them, the twins, always together, always waiting. When I finally went back to Crow Hill, the year was 1919. My hands shook worse than the leaves, my breath thin as paper. The path had almost vanished under moss, and yet I followed it by memory, step by trembling step. The air was thick, the kind that tastes like rain and rust, like something old remembering your name. I found the farmhouse first, or what remained of it. Only the stone chimney stood, blackened and cracked like a bone that never healed right. Around it, the soil bulged in strange places, as if the earth had been fed too well. I counted 7 of them, 7 small mounds in a perfect ring. That number meant something to me. I couldn't place it at first, until I remembered the travelers. The peddler from Kentucky, the preacher's daughter, the man with the golden pocket watch. 7 souls that vanished one winter long ago. The crows didn't just eat to survive. They were feeding something. I knelt beside one mound and brushed away the weeds. My fingers hit something smooth, metal maybe. When I dug it free, it was the preacher's watch. Still ticking. I swear to God it was still ticking. I threw it as far as I could, but even as it vanished into the trees, I could hear its faint, stubborn rhythm. Then I heard a voice, not a whisper, not wind, a voice low and deep, speaking my name the way only family does. I turned and saw them again, the twins, unchanged by time, standing at the edge of the clearing. Their faces were pale but calm, their eyes hollow, as if they'd forgotten the use of blinking. The taller one stepped forward. "You left us hungry," he said. His voice was wrong, too even, too steady. You buried our supper before the feast was done. I wanted to run, but my legs were heavy. Shame does that to you. It anchors you where you least want to be. I managed to speak, though it came out cracked and thin. You were my sin, I said. Not my son's, but as the words left my mouth, I knew the lie. They weren't born from the devil's will. They were born from mine, from the choices I made, the love I pretended wasn't mine, the silence I thought would bury the past. The shorter twin, the one with the scar along his chin, smiled, slow and patient. We remember her, he said. We remember Mama. We remember you. And then both of them laughed, a sound like bone-scraping stone. The air grew heavy. The trees bowed as though they too were listening. I dropped to my knees and begged them to stop, to forgive, to fade, anything but this. But forgiveness was never theirs to give. They only wanted what had been promised. The last meal, the final offering. For a long time, I thought they meant my flesh. But as I looked into their faces, those hollow, endless eyes, I realized what they were really after. My confession, the truth I had buried deeper than those bones. You see, every curse begins with silence. And mine had been festering for 30 years before I continue. Tell me something wherever you are. What time is it where you're listening? Is your night as still as mine was that evening, when even the crickets held their breath? Because the next words I spoke on that hill woke something that should have stayed asleep. It's strange how quiet the world gets when you finally stop lying. The wind had gone still on Crow Hill that night. Even the stars seemed to hold their distance, watching, not shining. I could feel the weight of every year pressing against my ribs, as if the earth itself was trying to drag me down where I belonged. The twins waited side by side, pale and patient. Not ghosts, not quite human either. Just the shape of what I had made them become. I told them the truth then. How it began. How hunger had nothing to do with food. You see, the winter of '56 was the coldest anyone remembered. The blizzard took the cattle first, then the crops. People ate bark, roots, rats if they were lucky. But the Crow family, we had something else. Something alive. I thought I could hide my shame under mercy. I told myself that feeding the children the flesh of the dead was survival, not sin. But sin always finds a name, and mine was spoken through their mouths. When the twins grew, they grew wrong. Too tall, too strong, too silent. They didn't sleep. They listened. Every night they sat by the fire, whispering the names of those buried behind the house as though they were praying to them. Sometimes I'd wake to find them staring at me, eyes empty but knowing, like the dead had lent them sight. So I burned the house. I told myself I was cleansing what I'd done. But the truth is I wasn't purging evil. I was spreading it. The fire took everything except the root cellar beneath the floorboards, where the truth was still alive, breathing through the smoke, that night on the hill. I said it aloud for the first time. You're not my curse. You're my children. And with that, the twins began to fade. Not vanish, fade. Their bodies turned to shadow, their outlines swallowed by mist. But the sound they left behind stayed with me. It wasn't laughter or screaming. It was breathing, steady, endless breathing, as if the mountain itself had begun to inhale. They were never gone. They just changed shape. Every year after that, travelers would go missing. Every year, the soil around Crow Hill grew blacker, richer, heavy with something it shouldn't carry. Folks said it was just superstition. But when they built the new church nearby, every grave they dug filled with water, red, thick and sweet-smelling like iron. I've carried this weight too long. My hands still tremble from the memory of their touch. I can still see them in the firelight, their faces streaked with ash and something darker. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear them chewing, slow, patient, grateful. And I know they're still waiting for me to finish what I began. If you've stayed this long, If you've listened to my words without turning away, then you already feel it, don't you? The heaviness in your chest, that little ache behind your ribs. That's how it starts. The hill remembers every voice that speaks its name. So before I finish, if you wish to hear the rest of these forgotten confessions, stay with me. Subscribe and listen until the end. Though I fear there's never really an end, only echoes, because when I die, and it won't be long now, someone must take my place. Someone must keep the story breathing. The crows were never just two brothers. They were hunger given shape, silence given sound. And hunger never dies. It only changes its face. When they found me, I hope they'll say I told the truth at last. That I didn't carry it to the grave like the rest of them. The earth beneath Crow Hill will open one last time, and this time I'll go willing. There's a warmth in my chest now, spreading slow, like a candle burning its last inch of wax. Maybe that's forgiveness. Maybe it's just death. Either way, I'm ready. The wind's moving again. Listen close. You can hear them breathing too.